Hello and welcome to our wellbeing series, Coping Well During COVID. We're so excited to bring this series to you, and I really hope you go away with some really useful strategies to help you to manage your anxiety. My name is Emily Gardner and I'm a cognitive behavioural therapist working for the NHS in London. And I've been trained to deliver specialised therapy for adults with anxiety and depression. And today our session is going to be focusing on managing anxiety. This series of sessions is designed to provide you with a toolkit of evidence-based resources, tools, and ideas to help you over the next few days, weeks, and months. And the content of these sessions is based on cognitive behavioural therapy, which is an extremely effective treatment for anxiety and depression. And the idea behind it is that it makes changes to our thoughts and our behaviours with the idea of improving the way that you feel. Today's session, you will hopefully leave with a really good understanding of excessive worry and how worry can be maintained. And we want you to understand the links between your thoughts, your feelings, and your physical symptoms and how you behave. And then you'll gain a knowledge of several techniques which you can use to manage your anxiety and worry. So I'd like you to think about what you would like to get out of today's session, and think about what you're struggling with and the challenges that you're experiencing and what you hope to gain from today. So when we have previously offered this session as a webinar, we asked this same question to our audience, and our responses were very interesting. And so I'd like to share some of them with you today. So someone said they would like tools and techniques for managing mental health during this time and talking about it with family, friends, and colleagues. And someone else would like to manage anxiety around COVID-19. Someone else wanted to know how to manage anxiety. Some strategies on how to deal with a friend who is anxious. Reassurance. Someone else would like support for dealing with anxiety around COVID-19. And one more I'll share with you. Practical suggestions and tips to help with anxiety. So whatever your hopes are, and these hopes, we really do hope we cover them today and you go away with some really useful tips and strategies to help you manage your anxiety. Right now, we are all going through an incredibly difficult time, and we've never been through anything like this before. And so as a result of that, you may feel really worried and anxious because things are so uncertain and unpredictable, and you may feel that you have little control. You may feel scared, or perhaps find yourself worrying a lot more than usual. And you may find that you're fine one moment, but then the next you're feeling really overwhelmed. Emotions like this are normal and to be expected. We have all had to make so many changes to prevent the spread of this virus, and these will naturally have an impact on the way that we feel. And so please recognise that it's okay not to feel okay. However, some of you may be really struggling right now and feel that you have nowhere to turn. And so I want you to know where you can go if you feel like you need immediate support. So if you're having thoughts of suicide or of harming yourself in any way, please talk to someone. You can contact the Samaritans any day or night, and you can call them on 116 123 and they'll be there to support you. We will also provide further information at the end of today's session about further support available to you. Everyone experiences anxiety on some level, and the symptoms of anxiety can feel really overwhelming and distressing, and they can make people feel concerned that something might be wrong with them. These are symptoms such as increased heart rate, breathlessness, feeling hot and sweaty, pins and needles, potentially even a knot in your stomach. And those are just some of the symptoms. And although you may feel alone in your struggle, many people experience anxiety on a regular basis. In fact, it's estimated that 1 in 5 people experience excessive levels of anxiety in their life. And it can affect anyone at any stage. No one is exempt. Anxiety is a survival instinct, and it has been designed to protect us from danger. It's called the fight or flight response. It has protected us for thousands of years and has been passed down through our ancestors. So if we think back to when our ancestors were hunter-gatherers, they would be faced with the daily threat of a ferocious animal such as this lion drinking from their watering hole. And so when faced with this danger, this response is essential, as it initiates a whole series of physical and behavioural changes that serve to protect us. When confronted with danger, we typically flee from the situation or we stand and fight. And the main purpose of this response is to protect the individual. So while it feels very distressing, it's not harmful. As soon as the danger is perceived, the brain sends a message to our autonomic nervous system, activating the various areas of our body to be ready for action. We will experience physical changes from head to toe. You may notice an increased heart rate, and this is to ensure that blood is pumping around the body faster so that the organs get the oxygen that they need. Whilst blood and oxygen is being sent to where it's needed, our large organs and our muscles, it's being taken away from areas where it isn't needed, such as our skin, our fingers, our toes, and the result can be looking pale or feeling cold or numb. You may even notice changes to your breathing, and this is very important as it's providing oxygen and blood to our tissues. And this can create feelings of breathlessness, choking or smothering, tightness in your chest. Another main side effect of this breathing is that the blood supply to the head is actually decreasing. And as a result of this, you may find that you're feeling lightheaded, or perhaps you have blurry vision. But essentially, all of these symptoms can be explained by this fight or flight response. So it's really important to remember that it's a normal, healthy bodily reaction to a clear threat. And it makes sense when there is a clear threat, and it's helpful in situations where we need to react quickly. So for example, if a car pulls out on us in a junction that we didn't see, it's really beneficial to us that this response kicks in and we are able to get out of the way and into safety. And once that threat is gone, everything returns to normal quite quickly. In our modern day, the threats are not quite the same. So, for example, in our day-to-day lives, the fight and flight response can be triggered by everyday things where there is actually no obvious threat. So, for example, we may find that we break out in a sweat at our desks, perhaps in response to an email, or maybe whilst watching the news, or opening a letter that we thought was a bill. So when we experience this kind of reaction to a non-obvious threat, it can feel quite distressing, and it doesn't always make sense, but it always comes back to that fight or flight response. Naturally, what we've been going through recently will be having an impact on how we feel. And it can be really helpful to break it down so that we can understand what's happening to our mood. We use a 5 areas model to help us do this, and it can be a really useful tool in helping us understand the vicious cycle of anxiety. So here, as you can see, we have 5 different areas to this model. So we have the life events, which are day-to-day things that happen to us. And they have a knock-on effect on to the type of thoughts we're having. So this might be worrisome thoughts that we might be having. And that has a knock-on effect onto our physical symptoms, as we've already been talking about today. That breathlessness, that increased heart rate, that tingling in our fingers. And then it's worthwhile thinking about our behavioural response. So how do we respond and react when we're feeling this way? And then how does that knock on to our emotions? How do we feel? And this can become a bit of a vicious cycle of anxiety and worry where we might feel quite overwhelmed. So we've prepared an example for you so that you can see how this can work. This is a common fear cycle that many of you may have already been experiencing over the last few months. Initially, you may have been worrying about catching the virus, or maybe worrying about your loved ones getting it. Your thoughts may have evolved to worrying about juggling working from home and looking after your children. Or perhaps you've been worried about your finances or the future of your job. All of these thoughts are quite distressing, and they have a knock-on effect on how we feel. Of course, if we're worrying about being unable to pay our rent, that's going to make us feel fearful. How we feel also has a knock-on effect on what we do. We may find that we spend a lot more time worrying. It's almost like it has a snowball effect, in that one small worry snowballs into lots of worries. You may find that it becomes really hard to cope with the challenges. And as a result of that, you may be drinking more alcohol or perhaps comfort eating. Our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviours also impact the way that we feel physically. And as I've talked about this earlier, you may find that you're noticing these physical symptoms more frequently. And you may find yourself restless and may even find it difficult to sleep at night. Breathlessness is a very common symptom of anxiety, but it's also a symptom of the virus. And so you may find yourself worrying that you have the virus because you're noticing that you're more breathless. However, this will make you more likely to monitor your body for symptoms or Google symptoms. This will make you feel more anxious and will reinforce the belief that you might have the virus. On the whole, this cycle ends up leaving us feeling overwhelmed, and it can feel really difficult to break this cycle. I want you to think about now what you've been worrying about. What are some of those things that have been on your mind? We've previously delivered this as a webinar, and we asked this same question, and we had a number of responses that I'd like to share with you today. So someone shared their worries about the future, about money, worrying about productivity and the impact on their work. Someone was worried about catching the coronavirus. We had worries about relationships and the impact on their family. Worried about dying. Worried about losing their job or getting furloughed or catching the virus. Worried about anxiety or depression leading to more time off from work. Worried about not being able to make plans and the uncertainty of everything. Getting seriously ill or dying from COVID. Losing everyone around them. Worrying about not being in control of things, or worries that things will never be the same again. These worries are completely understandable and normal. And we probably all had these worries over the last few months, and it's completely expected that we would. So what is worry? And you probably haven't thought about it like this before, but it is a normal process and a normal part of life, and everyone worries at some point every now and again. So it's not realistic to completely eradicate worry. So I'm not going to be able to help you completely eradicate it, because it is normal and we all do it. However, worrying can become a problem when it starts to become excessive, when we find that it starts to take up a lot of our time and it's having an impact on our ability to get on with our lives. We may even feel as though worry is in control of us. What we can look to do, as I said, is not completely eradicate it, but learn ways to manage it instead. It can start to feel like we're more in control of our worry whilst we break into that vicious cycle. And with time, we will see symptoms of anxiety improve as a result. So when life presents us with uncertainty, as it definitely is at the moment, we might start worrying about things that we don't have any control over. And that worry can be to the point where it is excessive and unhelpful. And as a result, it can cause us to have muscle tension, aches and pains, feeling restless, not being able to relax, difficulty concentrating or even sleeping. Or you may find that over time you're becoming really tired and fatigued and demoralized as a result. So what I want you to do is start to think about your worries like a bubble machine. Hundreds and hundreds of bubbles get fired out in all different directions, and they can be surrounding us. We could address each individual bubble and pop each one, but whilst we are doing that, the bubble machine is generating more and more bubbles at a faster rate than we can pop them. So the best way to stop the bubbles is to turn off the machine. These worry techniques work in the same way, in that we're focusing on turning off the worry process rather than dealing with individual worries. So I have here an example of how we can break the vicious cycle of worry. So as you can see at the top of this page, we have the physical symptoms that some of you may be experiencing, such as heart racing, breathlessness, nausea, and the thoughts that you might be having. So what if I catch the virus? What if I die? What if I can't cope with everything? What if my performance is impacted and I lose my job? And that leads on to our behaviours. And the most significant one that we're focusing on today is worrying. And yes, worrying is a behaviour. And that's what we want you to start thinking about it in this way, rather than thinking about it as a thought that's out of your control. Worrying is a process and it is within your control. We just need to teach you that. So the first step to starting to manage your worry is to record your worries in a worry diary. So we have a worry record here as an example for you. And so start by putting in the date and time that you had that worry, and then add in where you were, what you were doing. And so the example here is eating breakfast with my family. And then what was that worrisome thought? So in this example, it's what if I lose my job and can't pay my rent or mortgage? And then to put in your anxiety rating out of 10, so 10 being the most anxious you've ever felt. And then the final column, which we are going to talk more about in just a few moments, is to put whether or not that worry is hypothetical or practical. And so in this example, it's a hypothetical worry. We have two main types of worry: practical worries that we can act on, and hypothetical worries that we can't do anything about. Hypothetical worries are often what-if type thoughts, and they are about the future. People who worry a lot often find that they have a lot of hypothetical worries, and it can be difficult to put these thoughts out of their mind. And that can make acting on those more practical worries quite difficult. One problem that people who worry a lot often find is that they treat all of their worries in the same way. If we think through and try to solve all of our hypothetical worries, then we may be left feeling really frustrated, as there's often nothing we can do about them because they're hypothetical. They haven't happened yet. We may also find that then we don't have the time or confidence to actually act on those practical worries. So we have some examples here of practical worries. So examples that might be relevant to you right now would be, I have a cough. This could be the coronavirus. Or my performance at work has decreased. That would be something that's practical that we can do something about. I've been furloughed. I'm unable to pay my rent or mortgage. My child's school is reopening. Do I send her back? Or a family member is struggling. So all of those are really current, present problems that we can do something about. We may not know what we can do, but there is something that can be done. Whereas hypothetical worries, our examples might be, what if I catch the virus? What if I die? What if my vulnerable family member gets the virus? What if I lose my job? What if there is no job to go back to? What if I can't afford to pay my rent or mortgage? So there's a definite difference there in that these haven't happened. They may or may not happen. They're understandable, and it's very understandable that we would worry about these things, but it may or may not happen. So we have some space here for you to write down your own hypothetical or practical worries and have a go at categorizing them yourself. And it is important to remember that hypothetical worries may still be really difficult thoughts, and they are real life worries. And so it's reasonable to feel anxious about these things, but it's about making that distinction about whether or not we can actually do something about them in that moment. If we cannot, then it's a hypothetical worry, and continuing to go over and over it is only going to make us feel more anxious. Sometimes there is an overlap between our worries. For example, there might be a situation that we can do something about, but we're worrying about it at a time when we can do nothing. So a really good example of this is late at night when we're trying to sleep, and I am guilty of this myself. It's a practical problem that we could do something about tomorrow, but because it's the middle of the night, there's nothing we can do. And in this example, there's no point worrying about it right here and there. So the best thing to do is to save it for later. And so we have two strategies that we're going to talk about today to help you with that. But at that moment when we are worrying about it, there's nothing we can do about it. So it would count as hypothetical. So we would like you to have a tool to help you work out whether or not your worries are hypothetical or practical, and then what you do with them if they are hypothetical or practical. So we have a worry tree as a useful way to help you to categorize your worries. So you start by writing down your worry, and you can use the worry diary to do this. And then ask yourself, can I do something about this right now? Okay. If it's a yes, then it's a practical worry. And the best thing to do is to solve it. So you probably do have problem-solving skills already, but we're going to share with you a problem-solving strategy today that will make that as effective as possible. However, when you ask yourself that question, can I do something about it now? And the answer is no, then this is a hypothetical worry. And the strategy that we would recommend for you is a strategy called worry time. So we'll talk more about that as well today. Okay, so what do we do with our practical problems? And many of you already have some excellent problem-solving skills that you already use. But for some of you, it may be that this needs a little work. And so we have a strategy called problem solving, which is basically a step-by-step process to help you to resolve some of your problems. When we're feeling anxious, our ability to solve practical problems can be hindered. And we may feel frozen or fearful of actually acting on these problems as a result of our unhelpful thinking, maybe. And as a result, we may avoid solving our problems because it feels too overwhelming. And that may relieve anxiety in the short term, but in the long term, it just keeps those practical problems there in the background, playing on our minds. And so the best thing to do is to have a go at solving them and breaking that cycle. So by using this problem-solving technique, we can get clarity on our problems and think about what our options are by planning how to solve them. And that, as a result, can motivate change rather than avoidance. So the first step is to clearly identify the problem and write it down. So think about what it is that's frustrating you, what are you worrying about, and really specifically identifying what it is. And then step 2 is to brainstorm the solutions and try to get everything down that comes to mind, however ridiculous it may seem. And nothing is too ridiculous to write down. And this part's quite important because as you get your creative juices flowing whilst you're thinking about all of the options, even though some of them may not be a solution that you would ever use, it may help you think outside of the box, and that may help you generate an actual helpful solution. So the third step is to actually look at the strengths and weaknesses of each solution and just really consider the good points and the bad points. And then you can make a decision about which solution you wish to implement. And it's important to remember that it's highly unlikely that you're going to be able to find the perfect solution. Often there isn't one. And so we can put off acting whilst we wait for that perfect solution. But unfortunately, it may never come. And actually what you're doing is not doing anything. So it's important to weigh up whether not doing anything is a very good solution. So I always recommend adding do nothing to your list of solutions because often it's our default. So step 5 is to plan how to carry out that particular solution. Try and break it down into as many steps as possible. And think about what's going to make it easier to achieve this plan. And then put the plan in place. Carry out the steps in your plan and keep a note of how each step goes. Our final step in this process is to review your progress. And this is a really important part because our problem solving won't always go to plan, and there will be times when we don't resolve the problem straight away. And so it's helpful to spend a bit of time reflecting on that. And if we have faced difficulty in implementing our plans, it can often give us a sense of hopelessness and frustration that we haven't solved it. Whereas this strategy can help us because we have a list of solutions to go back to. So whilst we have tried plan A, we still have plan B, plan C, and plan D to fall back on. And we just keep going until we resolve the problem. We have also developed an example for you to look at of how to use problem solving. So I'll just talk you through that briefly now. So many of you may be experiencing financial challenges as a result of the virus. And so if that's you, then hopefully this outlines how you could resolve some of your financial challenges. So I've had a go at this for this problem here. So as I've been self-employed for less than a year, I do not qualify for the self-employment income support scheme. I am unable to work because of the virus. I do not have enough income. So that's the initial problem. We've identified that clearly. So step 2, well, we brainstorm all of the possible solutions. So apply for benefits, get a loan from a family member or friend, apply for a loan from the bank, speak to Citizens Advice, work out a new budget, apply for a new job temporarily, do nothing / enjoy your free time. So there may well be lots of other solutions that I haven't thought of here. So for you, if this is a similar problem to you, it's worthwhile really thinking about what you could do to solve this problem. And then it's the strengths and weaknesses analysis. So really spend some time weighing up the pros and cons of each solution. Or you can choose your top 3 like I've done here. So I've chosen apply for benefits, apply for a new job temporarily, or speak to Citizens Advice. So spend a bit of time weighing up the pros and cons of each one. Then step 4, select the solution. And for this example, I went with seeing what benefits that I might be entitled to as a result. So step 5 is to plan it out. So as I was unsure what benefit to apply for, the best thing to do was potentially speak to Citizens Advice tomorrow at 10 a.m. Following their advice, I will then apply online for the appropriate benefit. So that was the plan, and then it's putting that plan into action and carrying out the steps as planned and keeping a note of how each step goes, and then review it. So in the review, we've got Citizens Advice were really helpful and suggested I apply for employment support allowance. Following the call, I sat down and applied for ESA. I haven't heard back yet, but I've decided to start working on part 2 of my plan and looking at applying for a new job temporarily. So that's an example which may or may not be relevant to you, but hopefully it shows you that process. So if this example doesn't apply to you, you can still use this same strategy to help you work through your problems, and it will hopefully give you a clearer perspective on your problems and give you more options to work through. Okay, so that is what you do for practical worries. And I know it seems quite simple, but it is a really effective way of resolving our problems. And it can help us, especially when we write it down, it can help us get out of our heads and make it a bit more abstract and make a bit more sense as we write it down on paper. So coming back to our worry tree, writing down your worry, what if it's a no? So if it's a hypothetical worry, what do I do about that? And so our strategy for hypothetical worries is worry time. Okay, so now we're starting to think about what we do with hypothetical worries. And what I want to start with is a bit of an experiment. And I want you to, for the next few minutes, not think about the pink elephant, okay? So whatever you do, do not think about a pink elephant. And I have here a picture of a very cute pink albino baby elephant. It is extremely rare, but do not think about it at all for the next few moments. How are you getting on? It's quite hard, isn't it? And what you're probably finding is that it's not possible to not think about something. And this is often what we do with hypothetical worries. We tell ourselves not to worry. And what that does is that it brings those worries right back up, because actually by saying don't worry about it, it's bringing more attention to it. And it's a very ineffective strategy. The more we try not to think about something, the more we get that bounce back effect and the worry comes back to our mind. So what is the alternative? Well, for hypothetical worries, there's a very useful technique which is called worry time, where we use postponement rather than just pushing them away. So postponing worries means that it's okay for initial worrisome thoughts to enter our minds. So for example, the thought might pop into your mind, what if I lose my job? But then you make the decision not to chase that worry at that particular moment. And then not chasing that worrisome thought means that you don't try and anticipate all those worst case scenarios or run through all of those solutions to each of those scenarios. So instead, you postpone your worry until a later time, and that will be your worry time. The first step is to plan your worry time. So you need to think about a regular time each day where you are going to spend 20 to 30 minutes worrying as much as you like during that period. And at first, you may feel like you need quite a lot of time. So you may want to choose more towards the 30 minutes. And then over time, as you practice this technique more, you'll need less and less time. And it's really important that you set aside some time where you can do this and not be distracted by anything else. And so try and reduce as much distractions as possible. To get the most out of your worry time, we recommend that you have it at the same time every day, no longer than half an hour. Set a reminder for the start and finish, and also have it in a separate room that you can leave once you've finished. Secondly, throughout the day, write down your hypothetical worries as they come. So whenever you notice that you're worrying outside of your worry time, then you just categorize whether it's a hypothetical or a practical worry. As I said, if it's practical, the best thing to do is solve the problem. But if it's hypothetical, we need to postpone it. So write it down. And then when you come to your worry time later, you can worry about it as much as you like. But then the key, once you've written it down on your piece of paper, is to refocus on the present moment. Really absorb yourself in that moment, wherever you are, whatever you were doing before that worry popped into your mind. So if you were watching television, maybe turn it up a bit and refocus on what was happening. Or if you're writing an email, refocus on that email and the words and try and get back into that space before the worry interrupted you. And then step 4 is to do your worry time. So when you come to your scheduled worry time, it's great. Go and worry as much as you like for that period of time. Go through your list of hypothetical worries and worry about each one in turn. And for each one you have chosen, consider how you felt when you wrote that worry down. And ask yourself these questions. Has the thing you were worrying about happened? How did you deal with it, if it has? Were there any worries that you have come back to during your worry time that are no longer a problem? Reflect on what it feels like to worry as much as you want for that period of time. Did you need as much time as you planned? And if some of the worries that you wrote down are no longer a problem for you, put a line through them and let them go. After worry time, I really recommend that you screw up or throw away or put a line through your list, because it's always good to start with a new list and fresh paper every day so that you can only focus on the worries that have happened since your last worry time rather than carrying any over. So by setting time for our worries, we gain back a bit of control. Rather than letting our worries consume us, we can enjoy the present moment more and address the worries we have in that set amount of time. And overall, the amount of time we spend worrying is reduced. If we can learn to contain our worries to that specific worry time, we are teaching the brain that we do not need to worry throughout the day. It teaches the brain that worrying serves no beneficial purpose, because time and time again, when you look at your worry list, most of the time those worries do not happen as you predict, or they happen in a completely different way. And so you can learn that there's not much point in worrying about them. Over time, people tend to find that this technique helps them to desensitize to their worries. So if you write down the same worry every single day, you learn not to feel as emotionally impacted by that worry. And you eventually will get bored of that worry, and it won't elicit that same emotional response that it did when you first started this technique. And the more we practice this worry, the better we get at putting those hypothetical worries aside. And that means that eventually we can do this process without having to write down those worries and postpone them to our worry time. We can just do it by deciding that they're hypothetical. And this is how people who don't worry do it. Think about someone you know who is not a worrier, and they are likely to be good at this step where they categorize whether or not a worry is hypothetical or practical. And as soon as they realize that there's nothing they can do about it, they let it go. So here we are. We have 2 strategies today that we want you to focus on: the problem solving for our practical worries and the worry time for our hypothetical worries. And our take-home messages today: anxiety is inevitable. It's normal and healthy. Write down your worries. Recording them will get them out of your heads and they will feel more concrete on paper. Have a go at categorizing your worries into hypothetical and practical worries. And then have a go at that problem-solving strategy to help you get clarity on your problems and work through what your options are. And then finally, use worry time to postpone your worries rather than just push them away. I wanted to highlight some of the things in the slide pack which should accompany this video today. We have here a 5 areas model, which is a way to break down that experience of anxiety and to help you to understand what's going on for you, because we are all different. And we've given you examples of how you may feel, but it's worthwhile thinking about how you feel. We also have another example of how you can use problem solving. So I had a go at a childcare problem, as it may be something that many of you are struggling with or have been struggling with. So just to give you an idea of how you might use the problem solving strategy for a different problem. And we also have some information about our local IAP services, which are fantastic if you feel like you need more support. The IAP services are free and national, and they are funded by the NHS. So if you feel like you need more support for your anxiety and worry, then you can access a local IAP service for free. Now, you can either do this by going to your GP or by self-referring via the link on this page here, and you type in your postcode and it will bring up your local IAP service, and they are fantastic and you will get the support you need there. If you need urgent support for your mood and you feel like you don't have anywhere to turn, then please seek help. If you are having thoughts of suicide or of harming yourself in any way, please reach out to someone, whether it's a friend or someone you trust, or your GP. We do recommend that you speak to your GP about these thoughts that you're having, as they will be able to direct you to the right places for support. If you aren't able to speak to your GP, or you feel like you need urgent support right now, then we recommend the Samaritans. As we mentioned at the beginning of today's session, you can call them free on 116 123, or alternatively, you can contact Shout on 85258, and you can text them any time of day or night, and they will be able to offer you confidential support. If you're not sure what support is available to you, then the NHS Urgent Support Guidance is very useful, as it will be able to help you work out what support you need. We also have some useful resources and links. So many people have been thinking about how to support you during this really challenging time. And so we wanted you to know where you can go and what information is out there that might be beneficial to you. So please have a look at this if you get a moment after today's session. So we come to the end of our session today, and I really hope that you have come away with something that you can put into action and improve the way that you feel. But remember those 2 strategies. If you're having practical worries, then you can use problem solving to give you clarity. If you're having those hypothetical worries, then use that worry time strategy to help you postpone those worries. If you would like more support, we do have further episodes as part of this series that we would love you to come and watch. Wish you all the best. Take care.